Probability is the likelihood or chance of an event happening. And in number terms, probability goes from 0 up to 1. 0 in probability means impossible. So if something absolutely cannot happen, not just unlikely, if it absolutely cannot happen, we would say it has a probability of 0. So for instance, if today is Monday, tomorrow cannot be Friday. So that would be impossible. 1 is certain. So sticking with the same example, if today was Monday, what's the probability that tomorrow will be Tuesday? That probability would be a 1 because it's certain. If it's got an equal chance of happening, so if you throw a coin, there are two sides to that coin, so the chances of you throwing a heads would be the same as you throwing a tails. So that would be called a half in number terms, or in words we can say evens. It's got an even chance of happening. So the probability of an event happening is a fraction. You can write it as a decimal or a percentage, but most of the time in maths we'll write it as a fraction. So we put the number of favourable outcomes on top, and the denominator would have the number of possible outcomes in it. So favourable outcomes just means how many satisfy the condition, and possible outcomes just means how many is there in total. So the probability of throwing a heads is 1 over 2 because there's one head on a coin and there's two heads in total. And we'll do some examples so we can understand how we make our fraction better. Okay, so we often talk about dice when dealing with probability. So I've put some examples down the side. Dice are numbered 1 up to 6. There's 6 faces on a dice. So the number of possible outcomes is 6 always on a dice. So all our fractions should be over 6 to start with. But we simplify fractions down if we can. So the probability of throwing a 2, we put a P at the front for short for probability, and then whatever we're trying to find the probability of, we just put that in a bracket. So this would read probability of throwing a 2 equals, right, there's 1, 2 on a dice, or on a die, and there's 6 faces in total. So probability of throwing a 2 is 1/6. Odd. Now odd just means all your odd numbers. So we've got a 1, a 3 and a 5. So that's 3 faces in total, that would be odd, and 6 faces in total. So what does 3/6 simplify down to? It simplifies down to 1/2. So always simplify your fractions if you can. Okay, what's the probability of throwing a 1 or a 6? So that's 2 different faces. So that would be 2/6, and we can simplify that down to 1/3. Less than 4? What would be less than 4 on a dice? If it says less than, that does not include the 4. So that would be a 1, a 2, or a 3. So there's 3 of them. And again, that would be 1/2. So the number that I initially put on the top is how many favourable outcomes we have. So how many satisfy the condition of being odd in this case was 3. And the possible outcomes in total. So how many total possible outcomes do we have? We've got 6. So 3/6. Moving on to another example. Okay, so here's marbles in a bag, and what's the probability that I'm going to pull out an orange if I cannot see the marbles and I just put my hand in randomly and grab a marble? What's the probability I'm going to choose orange? So what you have to do first is count how many marbles are there in total. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in total. So they're all going to be over 9. So orange, there's 2 orange, and there's 9 in total. So the probability of choosing orange would be 2/9. Yellow, well, there's 4 of those, so 4/9. Purple, I don't know if you can see on the screen very good, but these three darker ones are coloured purple. So 3/9. Now 3/9 can be simplified, so we'll go and simplify that down to 1/3. Blue. That was just put in as a trick. There are no blue marbles there, so you would just say 0. You don't need to say 0/9. We can just say 0 because 0 divided by anything will give you 0. So if it's impossible, you don't need to write a fraction, you can just write 0. And if it was certain, you would just write the number 1. Okay, so for probability, just remember, use a fraction, put on how many is there in total at the bottom, and then if we're doing probability of orange, we just count how many orange marbles are there and put that as the numerator. So number of favourable outcomes on top, and then the number of possible outcomes overall goes on the bottom. But always simplify down your fractions if you can.